The dismissal. The galactic Senate chamber floated in the void between three dead stars, a testament to the advanced civilizations that had built it 10,000 years before humanity discovered fire. Its crystalline walls pulsed with the light of 100 different species' life support systems, creating a rainbow of existence that would have brought tears to any human artist's eyes. Today, however, those walls would witness either the greatest folly or the most profound awakening in galactic history. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood at the entrance portal, her pressure suit feeling primitive compared to the biomorphic fields and quantum-stabilized atmospheres the other species used. She was humanity's voice, chosen not for her diplomatic skills but for her military understanding. Earth's leaders had insisted on sending someone who truly comprehended what they were offering and what they were warning against. The proconsul, a being of pure electromagnetic consciousness housed in a pillar of living metal, called the assembly to order. Its voice resonated through every translator, every consciousness, every data stream simultaneously. The gathered representatives, over 300 species strong, turned their various sensory organs toward the center platform where Sarah now stood. She cleared her throat, an utterly human gesture that caused several species to emit what their translators interpreted as amusement. The Zarathi delegation, massive creatures of silicon and plasma, their forms constantly shifting between solid and energy states, were particularly vocal in their dismissal. Their representative, High Marshal Krextor, had already publicly stated that humanity's inclusion in the Senate was premature by at least a millennium. Sarah activated her holographic display, showing Earth's position in the galaxy, its colonies, and its defense networks. She began speaking, her voice steady despite the weight of skepticism pressing down from every direction. She explained humanity's journey to the stars, their peaceful intentions, and their desire to contribute to galactic civilization. The audience listened with barely concealed impatience, having heard similar speeches from countless young species before. Then she moved to the military briefing, as required by Senate protocol for all new members. This was where things always got interesting. Sarah displayed schematics of humanity's primary defensive weapons, the Mark 7 orbital railgun platforms that protected every human world. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Laughter, or its equivalent, rippled through the chamber like a wave. The Valendi ambassador, whose species had transcended physical warfare 3,000 years ago, projected their thoughts directly into the translation matrix. The humans still use kinetic projectiles, how quaint. Next, they'll show us their stone axes and fire sticks. The comment generated more amusement, and Sarah noticed several delegations beginning to pay attention to other matters, their interest already lost. Sarah continued undeterred. She explained the specifications, the velocities achieved, the impact forces generated. A tungsten rod, she explained, accelerated to 5% of light speed, carried the destructive force of a small nuclear device but with perfect accuracy and no energy signature until impact. The Zarathi High Marshal made a dismissive gesture with one of his energy tendrils, his form flickering between states as he spoke. "Commander Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying the weight of condescension that only millennia of dominance could provide. "The galaxy abandoned such primitive weapons long ago. Our shields can dissipate the energy of a supernova. Our weapons can destabilize molecular bonds at the quantum level. Your little metal slugs would simply vaporize against our defenses before they could even register as threats." Sarah looked directly at the Zarathi delegation, then slowly scanned the entire chamber. Every species here had energy-based shielding, designed to counter energy weapons, particle beams, and exotic matter projectiles. They had spent thousands of years perfecting these defenses against each other. She had one more piece of information to share, one more warning to give. She pulled up a new display showing the mathematics of kinetic impact versus energy absorption. The equations were simple, elegant, and terrifying in their implications. Energy shields worked by dispersing incoming energy across their entire surface area, spreading it thin until it could be safely radiated away. But kinetic weapons were different. They delivered their energy to a single point, faster than any shield could redistribute the impact force. The chamber had grown quiet, but not from understanding. They were quiet from boredom, from the perceived waste of their time listening to primitives explain basic physics they thought they had transcended. The proconsul began to signal that the presentation time was ending. Sarah made one last attempt. She looked at Ambassador Thylon of the Marathi, whose species prided themselves on scientific understanding. "Your shields are magnificent achievements," she said, "but they were designed for a different kind of warfare. Our weapons are not energy that can be dispersed. They are matter, moving at relativistic speeds. The physics are fundamentally different." Thailand's crystalline form chimed in what the translator suggested was polite disagreement. "Young species often overestimate their capabilities, Commander Mitchell. We have faced kinetic weapons before in our primitive past. We evolved beyond them for good reason. Energy weapons are simply superior in every measurable way." The Senate moved to vote on humanity's membership status. They were granted provisional membership, the lowest tier with restrictions on technology transfer and military cooperation. They would be observers, learners, children at the table of their betters. Sarah accepted the decision with grace, though her jaw was tight with frustration. As the assembly dispersed, High Marshal Krextor approached her, his massive form towering over her human frame. His energy state flickered in what she had learned was the Zarathi equivalent of amusement. "Do not take it personally, Commander. Every species goes through this phase. In a few centuries, you'll understand why we've abandoned such primitive methods. Your colonies on the frontier would benefit from Zarathi protection. We have been expanding our security umbrella in that region." Sarah met his gaze, or what passed for it in his shifting form. "Our colonies are well defended, High Marshal. We decline your offer of protection." Krextor's form pulsed with what might have been surprise or anger. "You would leave your people vulnerable out of pride? How typically primitive. When reality teaches you the error of your ways, remember that the Zarathi offered friendship first." 3 weeks later, Sarah was aboard the human frigate Resilience, patrolling the frontier near the colony world of New Haven. The colonists there, 50,000 souls, were building something beautiful. Cities that worked with the alien landscape rather than against it. Farms that had learned to cultivate both earth crops and native plants in harmony. It was exactly the kind of world that attracted attention from expansionist powers. Her communications officer, Lieutenant James Park, looked up from his console with concern written across his face. "Commander, we're detecting a large hyperspace signature approaching. Configuration suggests it's Zarathi, a full battle group." Sarah felt her stomach drop, but her training kicked in immediately. "How many ships?" 27 vessels, Commander. 5 battleships, 10 cruisers, 12 destroyers. They're broadcasting on all frequencies." "Put it through," Sarah ordered, though she knew what was coming. High Marshal Krextor's image appeared on the main screen, his energy form somehow managing to convey smug satisfaction, even across species barriers. "Commander Mitchell, what a pleasant surprise. I trust you received the Senate's recent ruling regarding frontier territorial disputes. This system has been awarded to the Zarathi Empire for resource development and security management. You have 6 hours to evacuate your illegal settlement." Sarah stood from her command chair, her voice steady. "High Marshal, this colony was established under Senate exploration protocols. You have no legal claim here." Krextor's form pulsed with amusement. "Legal claims are enforced by power, Commander, and as we discussed, your primitive kinetic weapons are no match for Zarathi technology. Save your colonists' lives. Accept our generous evacuation offer." Sarah muted the channel and turned to her crew. "Battle stations. Signal the colony's orbital platforms and the other frigates in the system. And Lieutenant Park, send a priority message to Earth Command. Tell them the Zarathi have come to learn." Park's fingers flew over his console. "Message sent, Commander. The colony platforms report railguns charged and tracking. Frigates Defiance and Perseverance are moving to support positions. On screen, the Zarathi fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Their ships gleaming with energy shields that seemed to bend space itself around them. They were beautiful in the way that predators were beautiful. Evolved for a single purpose, perfected over millennia of warfare. Against them, the 3 human frigates and the colony's orbital platforms looked like toys. Simple geometric shapes with none of the elegance of their opponents. Sarah opened a channel to her small fleet. "All stations, this is Commander Mitchell. You know what's at stake. These people came here to build something, to add to the galaxy's beauty, not take from it. We're going to show them why Earth still uses railguns. Target the battleships first, maximum velocity shots. Don't give them time to adapt." The Zarathi fleet began its approach supremely confident. Their shields shimmered with power that could turn aside the fury of stars. Their weapons ports glowed with exotic energies that could unravel matter at the subatomic level. They had conquered 40 systems with those ships, faced down powers that had existed since before humanity's sun was born. They had no idea what was about to happen. The Reckoning, the tactical display in the Resilience's command center, showed the approaching Zarathi fleet in perfect attack formation. 27 ships against 3 frigates and 6 orbital platforms. By any conventional calculation, it wasn't even a battle, it was an execution waiting to happen. But Sarah Mitchell knew something the Zarathi didn't. Something they had dismissed as primitive understanding. Physics didn't care about your level of civilization. Lieutenant Commander Torres, her weapons officer, called out from his station. Zarathi fleet has crossed the 1,000,000-kilometer mark. They're actively scanning us, Commander. Their energy signatures suggest weapons charging. Sarah studied the display. The Zarathi were taking their time, savoring the moment. They wanted the humans to understand their helplessness, to broadcast their surrender for the Senate to witness. It was a display of power meant to teach a lesson to all young species who might dare refuse Zarathi expansion. Distance to optimal firing range? Sarah asked calmly. 4 minutes at their current speed, Commander. The orbital platforms have already computed firing solutions. The Zarathi shields are operating at standard cruise levels, approximately 60% power. Sarah nodded. They weren't even taking humanity seriously enough to raise their shields to full power. Hold fire until they cross the 500,000-kilometer mark. All stations maintain weapons lock but do not reveal targeting until my command. The bridge crew worked in tense silence. Every person there had trained for this moment, but training and reality were different beasts. They were about to fire on one of the most powerful military forces in the known galaxy. If their weapons failed to perform as expected, the consequences would be catastrophic not just for New Haven, but for all of humanity. High Marshal Krextor appeared on the communication screen again, his energy form radiating confidence. Commander Mitchell, you have 3 minutes remaining. I notice your weapons are powered. Surely you don't intend to fight. It would be educational for you, I suppose, but terribly brief. Sarah stood, squaring her shoulders. Hi, Marshal. I'm transmitting detailed specifications of our weapon systems to your fleet. I strongly advise you to review them and reconsider your approach. Krextor's form flickered, and what she now knew was laughter. How thoughtful. I'll have my science officers add it to their collection of primitive weapons documentation. 2 minutes, Commander. The tactical display showed the data packet being received by the Zarathi fleet. For a moment, Sarah hoped someone over there would actually read it, would understand what the numbers meant. But the packet was filed away unopened. Just another piece of primitive documentation to be studied later by historians. Zarathi fleet crossing the 700,000-kilometer mark, Torres reported. Still maintaining standard approach vector, no change in shield configuration. Around the bridge, Sarah could feel her crew's tension. These were veterans, all of them, but they'd never faced odds like this. The youngest, Ensign Martinez at the navigation console, was barely 22. She'd graduated from the academy just 6 months ago. Now she was about to participate in a battle that would either mark humanity's destruction or its true arrival on the galactic stage. 550,000 kilometers, Torres announced. Optimal range in 30 seconds. Sarah took a breath. All stations prepare for rapid fire sequence. The moment they cross the line, execute. No warnings, no hesitation. Maximum velocity shots. Target their battleship's center mass. The Zarathi fleet continued its leisurely approach, their formation perfect, their shields shimmering with casual power. On the Zarathi flagship, Krextor was already composing his report to the Senate about the peaceful annexation of the human colony. He would be merciful, he decided. The humans would be relocated to serve in Zarathi manufacturing centers. They could learn real technology there. Crossing 500,000 kilometers now, Torres announced. Fire, Sarah commanded. The 3 human frigates and 6 orbital platforms fired simultaneously. 9 tungsten carbide rods, each massing 10 kilograms, accelerated down electromagnetic rails 30 meters long. In the space of 2 seconds, they reached 5% of light speed. They crossed the void between the human defenders and the Zarathi fleet in less than 4 seconds, far faster than any energy weapon at that range. The Zarathi shields detected the incoming projectiles, but their defensive algorithms struggled to classify them. They weren't energy beams, they weren't plasma. They weren't exotic particles. They were simple matter, moving at speeds that shouldn't have been possible for such primitive technology. The shields tried to disperse them as they would any attack, spreading the impact energy across their entire surface. But kinetic energy at relativistic speeds doesn't disperse. It transfers. The first rod struck the lead battleship's shields at 15,000 kilometers per second. The shield generators, designed to handle energy measured in terawatts, suddenly faced a different kind of physics. The rod's kinetic energy equaled a 50 megaton nuclear device, but delivered to a single point less than a centimeter wide. The shields held for exactly 3 nanoseconds before failing catastrophically. The rod continued through the battleship's hull, as if it were tissue paper. It punched through 40 decks, vaporizing everything in its path, creating a column of superheated plasma that expanded outward at supersonic speeds. Secondary explosions rippled through the ship as power systems overloaded and ammunition stores detonated. In less than 10 seconds, the pride of the Zarathi fleet was an expanding cloud of debris. The remaining 8 rods found their targets with similar effect. 2 more battleships simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to energy in violent explosions that lit up the void. The other rods struck cruisers and destroyers, boring through them with contemptuous ease. On the Zarathi flagship, Krextor's energy form fluctuated wildly between states as his mind tried to process what had just happened. 3 of his battleships, ships that had survived engagements with particle beam arrays that could crack moons, were gone. Simply gone. Evasive maneuvers. All ships, maximum shields. Return fire! He screamed across the fleet communication network, but the human railguns were already cycling for their second salvo. The orbital platforms, with their larger reactors and more powerful capacitors, could fire every 12 seconds. The frigates needed 15. It was an eternity in modern space combat. But the Zarathi fleet was in chaos. Ships that had maintained perfect formation for 1,000 battles were scattering in every direction. The Zarathi weapons officers, trained to engage in energy weapon duels at ranges of thousands of kilometers, tried to target the human ships. Their quantum disruptors fired, beams of exotic energy that could unravel molecular bonds lancing out toward the human defenders. Several struck home, and for a moment Krextor felt hope. But the human ships were designed for exactly this kind of exchange. Their armor was ablative ceramic over tungsten carbide, designed to absorb and disperse energy attacks. It was primitive, heavy, and incredibly effective. The Defiance took a direct hit from a quantum disruptor that would have vaporized a more advanced ship. Instead, its outer armor layer converted to vapor, carrying away the heat while the ship continued to function. "Second salvo ready," Torres announced. "Pick your targets," Sarah ordered. "Make them count." The railguns fired again. 9 more rods crossed the void at relativistic speeds. This time the Zarathi were trying to evade, but their massive ships, designed for long-range energy exchanges, couldn't maneuver fast enough to avoid projectiles moving at 15,000 kilometers per second. 2 cruisers tried to overlap their shields, creating a reinforced barrier. The tungsten rod punched through both ships as if they were made of paper. "High Marshal," the flagship's tactical officer reported, voice tight with panic. "We've lost 60% of the fleet. Our shields are completely ineffective against these weapons." "We must retreat." Krextor's form was now fluctuating so rapidly between states that he was almost invisible. This was impossible. The humans were using metal slugs, the kind of weapons his species had abandoned when they were still bound to a single planet. How could they be so effective? "All ships, emergency jump."
"Random vectors, retreat."
The surviving Zarathi ships began spinning up their hyperdrives, a process that took 30 seconds. The human railguns could cycle twice more in that time. Sarah watched the tactical display, saw the desperation in the enemy's movements, and made a decision. "Cease fire," she commanded. "Commander?" Torres looked at her in surprise. "They're retreating. We've made our point. Let them go. Let them tell the galaxy what happened here." The surviving Zarathi ships, barely a third of the original fleet, vanished into hyperspace. They left behind the wreckage of 18 vessels, thousands of dead crew members, and the shattered assumption of 10,000 years of military doctrine. The bridge of the Resilience erupted in cheers. Martinez was crying at her station, the stress and relief overwhelming her. Torres was grinning like a maniac. Lieutenant Park was already composing the after-action report that would be studied in military academies across human space for generations. Sarah remained quiet, watching the debris field that had been the Zarathi fleet. She opened a channel to New Haven Colony. "Colony Control, this is Commander Mitchell. The threat has been neutralized. The colony is secure." The response was delayed by distance, but when it came, she could hear the celebration in the background. The 50,000 humans on New Haven were safe. They could continue building their careful harmony with the alien world they'd chosen to call home. 3 days later, the Galactic Senate convened an emergency session. The footage from the Battle of New Haven had been transmitted by the surviving Zarathi ships, and every military analyst in the galaxy had studied it frame by frame. The implications were staggering. The proconsul called for order, its electromagnetic consciousness radiating something that might have been concern. The chamber, usually filled with the comfortable chatter of superior beings discussing inferior ones, was silent. Every species present was running the same calculations, reaching the same terrifying conclusions. Ambassador Thylin of the Marathi was the first to speak, their crystalline form resonating with precise harmonics. "The human weapons are not merely effective. They represent a fundamental oversight in our defensive doctrine. We have spent millennia perfecting shields against energy weapons, while leaving ourselves vulnerable to simple kinetic attacks." The Valendi ambassador, who had mocked humanity's stone axes just weeks before, projected thoughts tinged with embarrassment and fear. How did we not see this? How did we become so arrogant that we dismissed basic physics? High Marshal Krextor had been recalled to the Zarathi homeworld in disgrace, but his replacement, Strategic Commander Veltor, addressed the Senate. "The humans offered us their specifications. They warned us. We chose not to listen because we believed our technology was superior in all ways. We forgot that physics does not care about technological sophistication." Sarah Mitchell stood at the same podium where she had been dismissed and mocked. Now every sensor, every consciousness in the chamber was focused on her with desperate attention. She had prepared remarks, but looking at the assembled species, she decided to speak from the heart. "Humanity doesn't want war," she said simply. "We never have. Our weapons are defensive, designed to protect our colonies and our people. We developed railguns not because we couldn't create energy weapons, but because we studied your defenses and realized their weakness. We tried to warn you, not as a threat, but as fellow members of this galactic community." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The galaxy has operated on assumptions for thousands of years. Energy weapons are superior. Shields are invulnerable. Primitive species have nothing to offer. But assumptions are dangerous. They blind us to simple truths." The proconsul's voice resonated through the chamber. "What does humanity propose?" Sarah had been prepared for this question. "We propose a new defensive doctrine for all species. Layered defenses that account for both energy and kinetic threats. We're willing to share our railgun technology, not as conquerors but as partners. In return, we ask for full membership in the Senate and access to your energy weapon and shielding technology. Together we can create defenses that no single threat can overcome." The debate that followed lasted for days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Battle of New Haven had shattered the galaxy's comfortable superiority. Every species suddenly felt vulnerable, their magnificent shields reduced to useless light shows against humanity's primitive slugs. In the end, humanity was granted full membership unanimously. Technology exchanges began immediately, with human engineers working alongside alien scientists to develop hybrid defensive systems. Within a year, every major military vessel in the galaxy incorporated kinetic barriers alongside their energy shields. Sarah Mitchell retired from military service shortly after the vote, accepting a position as humanity's military attaché to the Senate. She kept a small piece of tungsten on her desk, a fragment recovered from the Battle of New Haven. When new species arrived, confident in their technological superiority, she would show them the fragment and tell them the story. "Physics doesn't care about your level of advancement," she would say. "It only cares about mass and velocity. Never forget that the universe's simplest truths are often its most powerful." The galaxy had laughed at humanity's railguns, but in the end it was physics that had the last laugh.